Hello Internet, and welcome to my live reaction for Fire Force Chapter 288. When we last left our heroes, Shinra and Sho had made it through Adola, had encountered Haumea, who had revealed her crown, revealing her eyes for the first time, which just looked kind of pained, I guess is the best way to describe them. She then killed Sumire and Inca as a kind of salvation. I still wish we had more from Inca at all. I feel like there's a whole character arc for her we kind of missed, but whatever, she's dead now, I guess. And then the Evangelist appeared behind Haumea, kind of signaling her role as this unable-to-lie saint. Sho described the Evangelist's true form as being the despair of the world, and Haumea started this kind of weird discussion about the nature of despair and faith and salvation. Specifically that, through despair, humanity created things like law and ethics and values and technology in particular. And that technology pushed death away, which made it less ever present, but also made humanity more scared of it. And so that fear and that despair, I think, is what led to the original Cataclysm, I think. It was all really, really weird. And I'm still kind of piecing through it myself. But anyway, Haumea questions Shinra, what else is there to escape this despair besides death? And that's where we leave off. With that kind of heavy question being thrown at Shinra's feet, we have this 2-page color spread, though, introducing the chapter, entering the final arc, as like Shinra and Sho in kind of modern clothes. Destined brothers bring us salvation. They're also both in like horror-themed outfits. Almost like T-shirts with horror movies on them. Sho has Texas Chainsaw Massacre on his. We can't quite see all of Shinra's, but we see Night of the something, which I'm assuming is Night of the Living Dead. But anyway, this is the final arc. In case y'all missed that announcement, this is the official final arc. Though I figured we'd been in the final arc for like the better part of a year now. Apparently, this is being counted as a new arc. And then we have a more classical cover of hands doing the Latom pose. Pray and hope for salvation in death. Chapter 288, What is Salvation? And we have our scan later page, our go by the manga page. And so we open just where we left off with Haumea's questioning. A little blurb though. Despair brings salvation, and salvation brings despair. How can that cycle be stopped? And Haumea goes on, nowadays it's completely normal to help someone in the face of danger. The stronger salvation is, the stronger despair gets. You should understand, since you're a fire soldier, Shinra. So, that bit though, because I described it, I had interpreted what Haumea had said last week as being sort of, as death is farther away, the fear of death is less present, but when it is present, it's stronger. That's the stronger salvation is, the stronger despair gets. But this seems to be more, it's normal to help someone in the face of danger, which I'm not quite sure how those two themes interact. I don't know. The cycle of salvation and despair is brought by fate itself, and the only way out of it is death. And we have this image of like chains in a circle leading to the Lord Death Mask in Soul Eater just being death. And Shinra is sort of taking in all of Haumea's theorizing. And Shinra just finally snaps, there's no way death is the only salvation. It's impossible that everyone wishes for death. And Haumea counters, on the surface that's correct. But what about deep within people's minds? Even people who held life in high regard and hoped for salvation still chose death. What's going on with that? Because I don't know. I'm looking at that line, like going back to the theme of faith. A part of me, maybe it's just the Christian upbringing, is looking at the rapture, right? In some, for those who aren't caught up on their premillennial Christian theology, I forget the terminology exactly. I think it's premillennial Christian theology, is that at some point, before the actual second coming of Christ, God will take all the believers up to heaven, and the rest of the world will go through 7 years of hell on earth, and then the final judgment comes in after that. It's a fairly popular belief, especially in like the mid-United States. And like, I would say given the Catholic imagery of the church, that might be what he's going for, but it's also not really a Catholic belief. That tends to be more evangelical Protestant, to get really deep into the weeds of Christian, not super deep in the weeds of Christian theology, but much deeper in the weeds of Christian theology than you would expect in a manga video. But also, Okubo just might not know the difference. He might have like heard the rapture somewhere and not quite be aware that Catholics aren't really pro-rapture, to my understanding at least. Anyway, Shinra is just sort of shocked by her statement. The people who held life in high regard and hope for salvation still chose death. Amaterasu has supported humanity's revival and their prosperity. Okay. I also feel like I kind of never quite got around my point with my rapture reference. That's my bad. Where was I with that? So like the people who tend to preach the rapture tend to be, devout. You think like your wealthy Baptist minister is sort of the vibe that sort of goes on about the rapture, which would be, hope for salvation, and they're well off. They have no real reason to choose death, but that is, in a way, going to heaven is a kind of death. Even if rapture proponents would oppose the idea that it's death, on the outside it still looks a hell of a lot like death. Anyway, Amaterasu is supporting humanity's revival and their prosperity. These two girls, referring to Amaterasu and Iris, I assume, are the very life force of mankind, and yet they learned of this cycle and accepted it, because nothing lasts forever in this world. Wait, is she implying that Iris has chosen death? Yeah! We see Amaterasu and Iris both skewered on spikes. According to Haumea, they chose that, but I don't know. And we see Iris, I guess, lifeless body just hanging there. That's one hell of a way to kill off Iris. And Shinra's just stunned. No way. And Haumea goes on. We can see that she's crying. She accepted the salvation of death that I offered her. And Shinra snaps. Don't try to make it sound nice. You murdered her. That... I can't see Shinra ever going along with... I couldn't really see Shinra going along with her argument at first at all. But at this point, there's no way he does anything but try to stop her. But Shozen is shocked at Shinra's rage. Brother! And Shinra just rushes at her, goes for a kick, and then I guess he's kind of frozen in place. I guess, because Haumea makes a slight move to dodge, but I don't get the sense in this bottom panel that Shinra is still in motion. What will you do then? Kill me? And Shinra snaps, you fucking bet I am! I'm gonna kill you and put an end to this stupid cycle! And that's exactly what Haumea wanted to hear. Then surely you understand? Salvation can be brought on through death. And that stops Shinra. Because death is very much not the answer if Shinra wants to counter Haumea. And Sho stops him. Stop, brother! You're just playing into God's hands. And Shinra takes a step back. And he can't actually attack her, because if he kills her, then she kind of wins this argument. But he still snaps, how dare you kill the sister! I'll never forgive you! And he looks up at the two corpses. And he holds back his tears. And Haumea goes on, Shinra, you've always been motivated by rage and revenge, have you not? The rage of having your family stolen from you won't be erased until you kill me. And Sho tries to calm him down, which given Sho's kind of persona as the calm one, is very, very fitting their whole vibe, I guess. You must not lose yourself to anger. Look at me, I'm with you now. And we see Shinra tries to calm himself, but we see him sweating as he tries to control his rage, fist clenched. Sister. And he flashes back to all these memories with Iris. I think that's their first meeting at first. Her in Vulcan's lab pressing the button. The muscle bit. I think that's the start of the Iris arc. And then them among the sunflowers at the cathedral. And then that might be post Shinra waking up, that final panel. Thank you for your concern. And Shinra sort of, breathes heavy, desperately trying to get a hold of himself. And Sho tells him, you must not allow yourself to be swallowed up by anger. Stay calm, brother. And we see, Haumea is just still standing there. And Shinra does look to be starting to kind of calm down. But then we cut right back to Iris's corpse. Which, God, is just not the route I was expecting. And Sho tells him, anger is the best trigger to bring out death and despair. And we see, though, Shinra seemed to be calmer, but he does not look calm there. There's more of a panicked look than an angry one, but still. You're right. Thanks, Sho. And Sho tells him, calm yourself. You can do it, brother. And Haumea then goes on to tell them, the relief after achieving revenge may suppress your anger, but the feeling will never truly disappear. And Sho draws his blade. My brother fights not only for revenge, but for the sake of human lives. This fight isn't for revenge. It's to protect all of humanity. And Shinra agrees, for the sake of our remaining comrades. Brother, it's time. And he draws the blade, activating his severed universe, stopping time. And Sho turns to him, after using my ability, you can still move, right? Don't you think Haumea can do that too if she's hooked up to the evangelist? Of course. I'm your brother, after all. And the two of them head for Haumea, this time not out of revenge. I think that's the important distinction, is that earlier when Shinra tried to kill Haumea at first, it was for revenge for Iris. But now it's something different. Now it's to protect. And so they they fly towards the two of them. The evangelist, though, seems more like a shadow than anything else here. Maybe that means something. Or maybe it's just so we can see Haumea. Hard to tell. And Sho says, let's end this. For our comrades! And they come to Haumea, foot and blade reaching for her, and they both freeze right next to Haumea's head. And then all of a sudden they're back where they started. And Haumea almost tauntingly asks, did you do something? And the two of them just stare. My blade, my kick. Only you and I can move during the stop time. Haumea didn't move an inch, Shinra tells him, and thinks, and yet our attacks didn't reach? And that's sort of where we leave off. To be continued, chapter 289, Becoming One. Okay. Let's talk Iris, first thing. Because I wasn't a big fan of killing Inca. I felt like she had a lot of character potential. And also, I was never... Without seeing more of a character arc from Inca, I'm not really convinced that she would go for death. I was always sort of... if we had spent time with Inca on the White Clouds, her developing from I'm in it for the thrill, I don't want to die, but I'm okay with risking death if it means I get that thrill. If we had seen her transition from that to... life is despair, the only salvation is through death, I could have bought that. But we didn't really get to see that. So but Inca's also just not important enough of a character that she... Let me rephrase. Compared to Iris. That's what I'm getting at. I'm getting at Iris here. Iris is where I'm very slowly going with this. Because Inca is... like a B-ranked villain, she's not the main villain, and she's not like the evangelist, and she's not like Haumea or Charon or something, or Dragon, those villains we spent all this time with building up. But she's also like not nothing. I'm lost in my thoughts. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going with this. Sorry, these last couple of chapters have been so fucking confusing. I'm not quite sure where I'm going with anything anymore. I have no idea where we're going. My point is, Inca is just important enough that I can one more time. Inca is just unimportant enough that I can accept that Okubo would just kill her off like that. Right? Like, she's not a main character. She's not a lead. I think it's bad for him to have killed her off like that, but I could believe that he'd do it. Iris, I'm a lot more skeptical. Killing Iris off screen is not good. It's not good. I mean, like, and as far as I can tell, all her death really does is just give Shinra more angst, which, like, he didn't exactly need. And I don't know, I just can't quite figure. Especially with all of that work done right after the time skip, right? Of Iris learning her, coming to realize that she has powers. And then we never get to see that at all? That doesn't play out? I mean, what I'm trying to slowly reach for, I'm trying to convince myself that Okubo is going to undo this in particular somehow. That Iris isn't dead, that either it's some kind of illusion Haumea is showing, or she'll somehow be fine, despite the fact there's a spear through her gut. I'm trying to convince myself of that. Both because I want Iris to live, and also because, like, it's just not great writing. It's not. I think there's too much thematically going on with Iris's death to just call it straight fridging, but it's a half step removed at best from fridging, and that's just never good, right? Maybe it adds to Haumea's argument that, like, death is the only salvation, but really most of what it's doing is sort of there for Shinra's angst. And it doesn't even last long, as Sho is like, stop fighting for your angst, for your revenge. It just seems pointless, and I don't like it. Comparing that with, like, Arthur's death, right? Which is kind of a high point of the series. That whole fight is a high point of the series, of course. But his death is just so well done. He acknowledges that, like, he desperately doesn't want to die, but he eventually acknowledges that's the only way to say, oh shit. Arthur chooses, in a much more roundabout way than Haumea wants, a kind of salvation through death. Salvation for others through his death, but salvation through death. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's sort of a foreshadowing kind of thing. Getting off of Iris for now. I'll come back to her at some point, I bet. Because, again, not a big fan of her dying like that. But didn't I say something way back when Shinra came out as, like, his first chapter, as sort of his first chapter post breaking out of the pillar, as sort of Arthur's whole arc in retrospect, in microcosm, right? I said something about that. I don't remember what it was exactly. How him stopping just like Arthur's defeating Dragon helped put a big stop to the Cataclysm, so was Shinra's stopping the moon with his feet. I feel like I said something about that, but I can't quite remember it, and everything in this chapter is so fucking weird that I'm not quite sure I don't know anything anymore. That's my hot take from this chapter, is I don't know a single fucking thing anymore. But my point is, if that was kind of Arthur's arc with Dragon and Microcosm, becoming this sort of hero that abates the Cataclysm, maybe that's setting up Shinra to do kind of the same thing Arthur did. Abating despair through his death. Not as, Haumea is taking salvation through death as, once everyone dies, there's no more despair. But maybe the answer, if we have to stick with salvation through death, which I really hope we end up avoiding, if at all possible, I'd rather we just reject Haumea's whole argument. But if we have to stick with it, then maybe as a kind of Shinra has to sacrifice himself, which would fit with the Jesus metaphor, right? Because he's the savior. Going back to the arc with Mari is, like, specifically the collective unconscious memory of Christ, who, of course, died and rose again. Though whether or not we get that rose again is another question altogether. Looking back at 273, where Shinra first reappears, is titled He is Risen, which might already count for that. Rising again, as He is Risen is typically used to describe Christ after Easter. I don't know. There's a lot to think about with salvation through death, connecting back to Arthur. I don't know. I really don't know. But Iris at least appears to be dead, and I'm not happy. And somehow, even under Severed Universe, Shinra and Sho can't damage Haumea? I'm assuming it has something to do with that shadow of the evangelist we see on page 20. I'm assuming that's not just an effect so that we can see Haumea there. Though it also very well might be. But something happened and they can't strike her. I don't know. All in all, this is a weird fucking chapter. There's a lot of things I really don't like about it, and a lot of things that I'm really intrigued by, and I want to see where this is all going. But God, I'm just not here for killing off Iris like that. I hope that there's some kind of workaround. But we'll have to wait and see as this final arc plays out. So I'm going to leave this video off here. Hope you all enjoyed the chapter and the video itself. If you did, feel free to drop me a like or subscribe. Do whatever makes you happy, And as always, if your life is your own, okay? Bye!